The notice of the topic for the adjournment order. The notice of the topic for the adjournment debate was submitted by the Honourable Member for Halifax Needham and reads as follows. Be it resolved that this government urgently work with educators and school committees to develop a sufficiently resource a provincial school violence prevention strategy. I now recognize the Honourable Member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, our kids and schools are not all right. School violence is a daily and worsening occurrence. This figure is worth repeating. In 2022-23 school year, there were 17,234 incidences of physical violence. 17,000. That represents an enormous year-over-year increase of 25%. And while enrollments have increased, incidences of violence have increased at a rate far exceeding that. No amount of violence in schools is an acceptable amount, but these numbers are staggering. Just this past week alone, I have read in the newspaper about 2 separate incidences in schools, in Truro and Cape Breton, involving weapons and school-wide lockdowns. Teachers have been raising the alarm about this growing issue for some time, for years. A survey conducted by the NSTU last year found that 87% of teachers believe school violence has increased since 2018. 92% said they've witnessed firsthand violence in schools. 55% say they've been the victim of a violent act or threat in schools. How can we expect children to learn and teachers to work in this environment? This situation is so worrisome that even the Auditor General has taken notice and is planning to release a report on violence in schools later this spring. This report will shine the light on this important issue, but government should not wait on the potential report by the AG and not wait for the recommendations to take action to ensure schools are safe spaces. Ask any teacher, ask any one of our teachers what this report is likely going to find. It's going to be the same thing that teachers have been warning us about for years. And while I understand that the Minister of Education has instructed a review of the Student Code of Conduct, we share the NSTU's concerns that this just doesn't go far enough. School violence is a complicated and systemic issue that can't be addressed adequately with a piecemeal approach. What I would like to see from the minister and from the government is action on taking a wholesome system-wide approach to how we can make our classrooms and schools as safe as we can. The rise in violence cannot be attributed to any one single thing, but the factors include mental health problems stemming from the pandemic, a lack of services to deal with them, increased poverty, and the need to balance appropriate consequences with supporting students' needs. And so all of these things are creating this situation where we see an increase in violent incidences and serious violence incidences. Teachers have been clear about what they're looking for. They've called on this government to firstly and importantly increase school staffing. In the face of the current teacher shortage, many students just aren't able to be adequately supported. A lack of supervision resulting from staffing shortages also poses problems. We know that it's been a difficult year with the rise in local examples of homophobia, transphobia, hatred, threats, and acts of violence in our schools. And as such, it doesn't come as a surprise that students are feeling that stress. According to the Student Success Survey, more than half of 2 LGBTQIA+ students feel like they don't belong in their school. This is not the kind of Nova Scotia we want to build for our children and all young Nova Scotians. In this year's report, 42% of 2S LGBTQIA students reported feeling unsafe or threatened in the past month. That's up 8% since 2019. And while overall 23% of students felt unsafe at school, among 2S LGBTQIA+ students, that number was nearly doubled, 42%. The rise of hate and violence in schools is unacceptable, and this government cannot stand by and not do anything. We need to make Nova Scotia schools safe places of support for 2S LGBTQIA+ students so our province can address and find solutions for the overrepresentation of 2S LGBTQ+ young people in care that are homeless and struggling with finding support, health care, and employment opportunities. Myself and my colleague from Citadel Sable Island have spoken with the Minister of Education about these issues, and we pushed to get a firm commitment on how we could use this survey information to improve schools for students. We also wrote to each and every MLA here sitting, and we encouraged them to stand firmly in support of 2S LGBTQIA+ people in their districts and across the province. Because we know that as elected leaders, we need to stand up directly to hate in our communities by making public commitments to a Nova Scotia that does not include hate. Government must move forward on concrete action to ensure the safety and well-being of all students in this province, but especially those from vulnerable groups. So we know that recent announcements like the entry requirement for education programs doesn't get to the root of the issue, which, according to the NSTU, is retention. A recent survey of teachers found that 84% have considered quitting in the past 5 years. That's a lot of teachers. Addressing teacher retention, addressing the need to fairly treat and compensate substitutes, increasing staffing across the board are all things that this government needs to do to ensure schools are safe. And yet, despite this, the recent budget falls short of meeting these pressing needs. There's nothing, absolutely nothing, in this budget to address violence in schools or teacher shortages. This is a status quo budget at a time when there is nothing status quo about the challenges students and their teachers are facing in our schools, says the NSTU President Lutz. Our most vulnerable students aren't getting the support they need because of lack of teachers. There has been an alarming rise in violent incidences that are becoming increasingly severe. And 84% of teachers are considering leaving the profession due to burnout and lack of resources to support their students. The NSTU was hoping this budget would signal a genuine desire on the part of government to create healthier, safer, and more sustainable learning environments for students and their teachers. Instead, what government delivered was the same old enrollment-based funding formula that existed for the last decade. This government isn't doing anything faster or sooner when it comes to supporting our children at school. So what are we urging this government to do? We're urging this government to take these concerns of teachers and school communities seriously. Take our children's and teachers' well-being seriously, and take actions to make sure our schools are safe. For we know that every child can learn, but we also need a learning environment where every child can be safe.